To the members of the panel, headed by Dr. Mary Penetrante, Dr. Lucio Ancho, Dr. Carmen Fernandez, Professor Altea de Nuevo, to my advisor, Dr. Lenny Rose Mucho, a blessed day to all of us. Today, I'm going to present my paper entitled Assessment of Tourist Destination Potential in Cuyo Islands, Inputs to Developing an Integrated Cuyo Tourism Development Plan. Of this presentation are the revisions made based from the comments and suggestions of the panel during my last thesis presentation. Specifically, the revisions made are in the background and rationale of the study, objectives of the study, conceptual framework, significance of the study, related literature, methodology, data analysis and interpretation, and then inputs to developing an integrated tourism development plan. In the background and rationale of the study, it was suggested by the panel to include SWOT framework in the discussion as the tool in assessing the potential or competitiveness of the destination. So the action taken by the researcher was to include this in the discussion. It was mentioned there that there are several methods of assessing the tourism potential of a place, such as the use of surveys, qualitative methods, and SWOT analyses. So SWOT analysis is a tool for planning and taking strategic actions and has been a frequent feature in organizational settings, but its applicability extends also to government, country, and industry. So analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of a place would encompass its geographical characteristics, whereas opportunities and strengths would involve competitions, market trends, social, political, and economic changes, as well as the regulatory matters. For the objectives of the study, it was suggested to by the panel the consistency with the verb tenses. So it was corrected, and also there's another suggestion there to remove the understudy in objective two. So the researcher also followed the suggestions of the panel. In the conceptual framework, it was suggested by the panel to discuss the SWOT matrix that was used in determining the level of potential of Cuyo Islands as a tourist destination. So the action taken there was the researcher discussed the SWOT matrix in the conceptual framework. It was included in the research the SWOT matrix that was used in the analysis of the potential of Cuyo Island as a tourist destination. It provided the results that were incorporated with other data gathering methods to determine the inputs to a tourism development plan for Cuyo and Magsaysay. For the definition of terms, it was suggested that the following key terms used in the study were defined conceptually and operationally, and that there should be proper indention for each term. So the action taken there was to follow the suggestions of Dr. Encho. It was also suggested by the panel to combine travel agencies and other business sectors and the significance of the study, and also to combine the researcher and future researchers. So I followed the suggestions of Dr. Penetrante to combine um, the travel agencies, the business sectors, the researcher, and the future researchers. So in the related literature, it was suggested by Dr. Penetrante to avoid citing references in the synthesis. So what I did was to remove the references that I did in the synthesis part of the related literature. The panelists' comments are discuss what analysis and data process, how to determine the level of potential using SWOT, discuss two sets of respondents, follow the correct order, and ethical considerations should be discussed under the research instrument. So what I did was to follow the suggestions of Dr. Penetrante to discuss the SWOT analysis and also discuss two sets of respondents and follow the suggestion of Dr. Ensha to follow the correct order and the ethical considerations. should be discussed under the research instrument. So in the SWOT analysis, to evaluate the potential of Kuyu Islands to become a tourist destination, SWOT method was conducted in several steps. The results from site evaluation, surveys, and interview were presented to the stakeholders who also took part in answering the different instruments used in this study prior to evaluation. So the key factors, which are the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, are a product of collaboration between the researcher and the stakeholders. So together, the researcher and stakeholders have identified these key internal and external factors. The four SWOT factors are then compared and determine the factors that need to be prioritized. After prioritizing the factors, the strategies were then formulated in line with the data from the comparison. So, in formulating the strategies, the stakeholders participated by providing their inputs to develop Kuyu Islands as a tourist destination, taking into consideration the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats obtained from the SWOT analysis. The generated data were then prepared for SWOT analysis to evaluate the potential of Kuyu Islands to become a tourist destination. The researcher presented first the data collected from DOT site evaluation, survey questionnaire, and KII to the stakeholders. The stakeholders were then given a chance to evaluate and provide inputs to the initially gathered data based on the three research instruments mentioned. The process was a collaborative effort between the researcher and the stakeholders, sharing different insights in evaluating the potential of Kuyu Islands to become a tourist destination. And then the researcher listed the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in terms of accessibility, accommodation, and attractions, after which the stakeholders have to validate the data collected from the SWOT analysis. So now let's move on to the data analysis and interpretation. To answer the first objective of this study, which is to identify the places of interest in the municipalities of Kuya and Magsaysay, we have the table here. The data show that Kapusan Beach ranked first with 124 points, Kuyu Fort ranked second with 122 points, and Kota ranked third with 95 points. On the other hand, Suba, Stone Breakwater, Miller School, and Kokoro Lagoon ranked last with 85 points. As shown in this table, 8 out of 13 tourism sites are natural attractions, while 4 attractions are historical sites. The islands provide different attractions ranging from beautiful sceneries and nature-based activities. Next is the current situation of the area in terms of accessibility, service and amenities of accommodations and attractions as assessed by service providers and tourists. So in this table, it presents the summary of the assessment of the service providers and tourists on the accessibility, accommodations, and attractions of Kuyu Islands. So the service providers and tourists rated it as high potential with a mean of 3.69 and a standard deviation of 0.29. In terms of accessibility, they rated it as having a moderate potential with a mean of 3.41 and a standard deviation of 0.16 as rank 1. In terms of accommodation, the service providers and tourists rated it as high potential with a mean of 3.68 and the standard deviation of 0.09 as rank 2. Lastly, in terms of attractions, the service providers and tourists rated Kuyu Islands as having a high potential with a mean of 3.99 and a standard deviation of 0.01 as rank 1. So this implies
that Cuyo Island has the potential to become a tourist destination, considering that the three assessments were rated highly in terms of um, accommodation and attractions, and also accessibility. This table shows the current situation of the areas under study in terms of accessibility as assessed by service providers and tourist response, and they rated as moderately accessible with overall mean of 3.41 and a standard deviation of 0.16. This result implies that Cuyo Islands are moderately accessible all year round, and the tourist attractions are near to the town proper. Tourists can access the islands as well as the tourist attractions. However, the island has no regular transport services. Having one main transportation mode for tourists is not enough to attract visitors, especially when travel convenience is compromised. Improving the quality of relevant tourism and transport services could strengthen the destination's accessibility and influence visitors' preferences. Next is accommodation. So in this table, it shows the current situation of the areas in terms of accommodation as assessed by service providers and tourists, and they rated it as highly available with overall mean of 3.68 and a standard deviation of 0.11. So the table here indicated that the services and amenities of accommodations in the areas are highly available and a significant part of tourism development. The concerns for this island, however, are its telecommunication and internet reception, as it was rated, or it was the least rated in this table. The service providers should also address this concern and establish cell towers that would improve the speed of their telecommunication and internet. It's not only to provide online access for the tourists, but also to provide them security as well.
Next is attractions. Table 5 here presents the assessment of the current situation of the areas as to attractions rated as highly available with an overall mean of 3.99 with a standard deviation of 0.01. Majority of the indicators were rated as highly available, which are a total of 7. The data here imply that Cuyo Island's natural attractions that are undisturbed are highly available. It is worth to note that festival celebrations every year indicate that cultural activities in the area could also be promoted to attract high-spending tourists. Aside from that, the islands are ideal for water sports activities as seen in the table, indicating that water-based activities are popular among locals and tourists. Natural attractions are also considered abundant on the islands. For the evaluation of the potentiality of Cuyo Islands as a tourist destination, utilizing the SWOT analysis matrix, internal strengths and weaknesses and external opportunities and threats were identified in a forum where stakeholders were invited to validate and participate in evaluating the potentiality of Cuyo Islands as a tourist destination. So after identifying the strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, the stakeholders contributed in the formulation of strategies as seen in this table. So here, in the strengths, the top three areas, Kapusan Beach, Cuyo Fort, and Kota, are one of the strengths of Cuyo Islands. Natural attractions are always appealing to tourists due to the nature and beauty of its landform. These attractions include beaches, mountains, lagoons, and islets. Cuyo Island has numerous natural attractions that can be developed into tourism sites. The next is water sports, or ideal for water sports. So water sports is also one of the leisure activities that tourists usually do when they are on vacation in a tropical country. These activities have become so popular over the years that even children can already try and enjoy. Since Cuyo is a group of islands and is surrounded by water, it is ideal for water sports.
Next is attractions are near to the town proper. Most of the attractions in Cuyo are near to the town proper. Inland tours could be done in half a day, while island hopping could be segregated into different clusters depending on the distance. This is appealing to tourists since they don't have to wait longer to reach other destinations. Um, Accommodations such as pension houses, beach resorts, inns, and homestays are also available in Kuyo Islands. So this could be viewed as a strength since accommodation is one of the basic needs in tourism. As for the weaknesses, the telecommunication, especially internet connection, has always been one of the major problems in Cuyo. At present, um, Cuyo, Cuyo Island is only accessible by ferry traveling to and from Manila and the cities of Iloilo and Puerto Princesa. The travel time, which is considerably dependent on weather condition, could still take longer than the usual 11 to 14 hours of time. Um, Also, there are islands in Cuyo Archipelago that are distant from the main island. Some tourists might not want to explore more of these islands, but may not get the chance due to this constraint. And lastly, for the weaknesses, the local governments of Cuyo and Magsaysay mainly focus on projects and community programs other than tourism. So that could pose as a weakness for Cuyo Islands if uh, they lack support from the LGU. For the opportunities, there is an opportunity for Cuyo and Magsaysay to offer other tourism activities other than water sports. For instance, Palawan State University has an external campus on the island, which means activities targeting the tourism and hospitality students across the country could be organized. Um, the rapid growth of adventure tourism and nature based has dramatically increased in the past years. So the researcher believes that it will continue growing in the coming years with proper planning and promotion. The LGUs of Cuyo and Magsaysay could use this opportunity to develop tourism in their respective areas. And then for the East Asian market, East Asia has a massive tourist market and that the money generating potential is very promising for Cuyo Islands. As for the trend in sustainability, the guests' awareness in sustainability issues also rises, and they begin to favor tourism products from business establishments that focus on sustainable production and operations. Then, for employment of locals, employment could also be seen as an opportunity for Cuyo Islands. The Palawan State University in Cuyo is offering tourism and hospitality courses, so the chances of the graduates to choose to work on the island will be favorable if there is tourism development. And let's move on to the threats. Three of the Philippines' top destinations are in Palawan: Coron, El Nido, and Puerto Princesa's Underground River. Palawan also won the award as the best island in the world by Condé Nast. These facts could pose a major threat to Cuyo's potential visitors in the future. Whenever there are threats of actual um, terrorist attacks, local tourism players suffer an immediate decline in business as guests cancel trips and hotel bookings. Pandemics like the COVID-19 could also be considered a terror threat in the country. People are scared to travel because they might get infected by the virus, and it doesn't have any proven cure in the market yet. Therefore, it hinders tourists from traveling to destinations since there are travel restrictions implemented anywhere in the world. And then for mass tourism, mass tourism is the biggest threat to the environment. It's hard not to notice the destructive influence it can have on the local context. When tourism is ecologically sensitive areas like Cuyo is unregulated, the environment can severely damage and development can ultimately destroy tourists' main incentive to visit. And then an unforeseen or anticipated economic recession due to the pandemic
would also reduce disposable income and threaten Kuyu's potential to develop. And then for the social, cultural, and environmental threats, with Cuyo becoming a popular tourist destination, the frequency of these tourists coming over could create a significant effect on the culture and social life of the locals. So based on the results of the SWOT analysis, the following strategies were formulated. The first one is introduction of sustainable tourism products like unique tour packages, expeditions, and cruises, and then destination branding like kiteboarding, cultural tourism, and or education tourism. And then we have market penetration and increased publicity efforts by allocating a budget in advertising the island to domestic market. And then for the WO strategy, product developments and improve existing services by entering a public-private partnerships with telco companies and other potential investors. For the SC strategy, improvement of general image by investment into IT and online presence. And the last strategy is to improve guest satisfaction through government intervention. When compared with Boracay Island, Cuyo Islands are at par when it comes to available attractions. However, the islands lag behind this well-known tourism site when looking into the accessibility and accommodation aspects of the destination. The results of this study were presented to the local governments of Cuyo and Magsaysay, together with the stakeholders coming from different agencies and sectors. Firstly, the top destinations identified in the study, emphasizing the top three destinations were presented and explained the corresponding points for each tourism site. Secondly, the results on the assessment of the areas under study in terms of accessibility, accommodations, and attractions, followed by SWOT analysis and comparative analysis, were also discussed. There were no questions raised during the presentation of the results as it was already validated by the stakeholders during the forum. The local governments of Cuyo and Magsaysay, through their tourism office and chairman committee on tourism, confirmed that they will consider the results and recommendations of this study in developing their own tourism master plan. Now let's move on to the conclusions. So, Cuyo Islands have natural attractions ranging from beaches, mountains, lagoons, islands, and islets. However, policymakers seldom see it as an option for increasing economic growth. They have no well-defined competitiveness plan for Cuyo because they do not have or they have not been provided with adequate evidence that once Cuyo is developed, they would be assured of the significant return on investment. This is the explanation behind the absence of a market positioning for Cuyo. Although Cuyo Islands have some weaknesses such as accessibility, there are ways to address it with the support of the local government. What is important is having identified Cuyo Islands as having a high potential as a tourist destination. The beauty of Cuyo Islands comes from its natural resources, something which would only necessitate infrastructure projects to become accessible, and the creation of more services and amenities to meet the needs of the tourists. The following are the recommendations. The researcher recommends that the local governments of Cuyo and Magsaysay should focus their branding in promoting natural attractions in their respective areas. Cuyo Islands must also promote its primary and most unique attractions, which can be kiteboarding. And then it is also recommended that the local governments of Cuyo and Magsaysay enter a public-private partnership with airline companies to improve the accessibility issue in this study. And then the local governments of Cuyo and Magsaysay should also take this opportunity to develop Cuyo Islands as a tourist destination. It is also suggested that the LGU should adopt the strategies formulated in the SWOT matrix. And then lastly, the LGUs of Cuyo and Magsaysay and other agencies should work together to improve tourism on the island. Investigation does not end with having assessed the potential of Puyo Islands to become a tourist destination. So the researcher, being a native of Puyo Islands and working in the hospitality industry, has decided to incorporate the findings of the study in the proposed tourism development plan for Cuyo Islands. The identified local attractions are mainly found in the population area. So for the existing tourism attractions, Kapusan Beach and Cuyo Fort, which are the top spots, are located in Cuyo mainland, which is a 7 kilometer stretch of coastline covering 11 barangays. Kota, on the other hand, is also located in Poblacion and Magsaysay. So these places must be among those in the list of existing tourism attractions. The local government has an advantage in terms of their future plans for developing these areas because they are physically accessible as these are in the heart of the island. And then in terms of the existing tourism markets, in terms of how these spots must be improved, it is important to consider the survey results based on the criteria set in the DOT handbook for the attractiveness of a place. For instance, Kapusan Beach has emerged on the top spot because it has been rated mostly in the aspects of ownership. It has been ownership, which means a public domain, and then availability of basic utilities and quality of surroundings. As a public domain, the local government would have full authority in developing Kapusan Beach without regard for the intervention of ownership claimants. Likewise, the presence of basic utilities is already an advantage as well as its natural beauty. So this would properly guide local government officials in their improvement plans for these places of interest. In the SWOT strategies, tour packages could be promoted to the right market. Educational tourism has been a niche that is not popularly explored for local tourism. In this case, in the case of Cuyo, since the closest island to it is Panay, and there are ferries plying the Iloilo-Cuyo route, field trips to Cuyo could be offered to students and faculty coming from universities in Panay. This market segment is ideal in Cuyo because it is budget friendly and affordable, unlike its neighboring islands in Palawan, which are already known for commercial tourism. And then for the accommodation, basic tourist accommodations are highly available in Cuyo. So this may not be able to compete with the level of luxury found in other tourist destinations, but Cuyo compensates for it with cleanliness and safety of the facilities, especially the water supply and food services. What the local government could enhance in this aspect would be the renovation or transformation of these places to suit the market. And then for the accessibility, the main problem of Cuyo as a potential tourist destination is the unavailability of the means of transportation throughout the year. It means that regular transport services are less accessible. Because the most accessible island from Cuyo is Panay Island, cheap educational tour packages can be arranged with Panay-based schools. And for the other infrastructures, a persistent problem that Cuyo and Magsaysay have been experiencing is telecommunication services. Internet connection has been a major issue. If tourism is to be extensively promoted, connectivity with the world must be a primary concern. For the institutions, one of the institutions that could aid in the promotion of Cuyo as a tourist destination is Palawan State University Extension Campus in Cuyo. PSU offers hospitality and tourism courses. That means it could host faculty-student exchange programs, culinary competitions, and other educational activities, opening opportunities for island visits. Memoranda of agreements could be made between PSU and universities in Panay Island for joint activities to be hosted by PSU. The strategies that emerged from SWOT analysis were the following: the introduction of sustainable tourism products such as tour packages, destination branding, market penetration and increased publicity efforts, product developments and improvement of existing services, improvement of general image by investing into IT and online presence, and improve guest satisfaction through better government intervention. So these strategies could be summed up into two priority strategic directions. The first one is to develop or developing destination branding for Cuyo as an educational tourism site. It is a unique positioning for Cuyo Islands that makes it attractive to local tourists, most especially from Panay-based academic institutions. This strategy emerged from the fact that regular transport services are not available throughout the year, that the only regular ferry schedules are Iloilo, Cuyo, Iloilo, and Puerto Princesa, Cuyo, Puerto Princesa routes. Most importantly, Cuyo offers affordable rates with basic amenities available, a well-preserved cultural heritage, unspoiled natural attractions, and tranquility. All these are conducive to educational tourism. The second strategic direction could be forging a public-private partnership. The challenges in information technology, telecommunications, or connectivity issues and other infrastructures support could be significantly addressed by the local officials through partnership with the private sector. So public-private partnership, this refers to the contractual settlement between the government and a private firm directed to financing, designing, implementing, operating infrastructures, facilities, and services. Ends my presentation. Thank you for listening.